In this video, I'm going to give you 4 reasons why your first rental property should be a house hack. Coming up. Hey guys, if we're just meeting, my name is Vitaly Volpov. I'm a practicing attorney and active real estate investor with over 78 rental units in my real estate portfolio and a part owner of a real estate brokerage in upstate New York. On this channel, I discuss relevant legal concepts as well as best strategies and tips for real estate investing and personal finance. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so that YouTube notifies you of all my future content. If you enjoy the content in this video, hit the like button and comment down below. So what are the reasons that your first rental property should be a house hack? Well, number 1 is ease of financing. The number 1 excuse that everyone gives for not being able to get into real estate investing is that real estate is too expensive and it's too hard to save up enough money for a down payment in order to buy your first rental property. Well, this concern is almost entirely eliminated when it comes to house hacking. And house hacking is basically buying a rental property where you live in one part of the property and you rent out another part of that property to a tenant. Right now, you can go to pretty much any bank across the country and obtain an FHA loan at only 3.5% down payment. This is in contrast to the 20 to 25% down requirement that banks will require you to have in order to buy a non-owner occupied rental property. When banks are considering whether to finance your rental property investment, they are looking at how much risk they're going to have in this particular investment. And one of the ways that they evaluate risk is by asking whether the person who's looking to borrow money from them is going to actually be living in the property for which they are looking to borrow. Statistics show that people are much less likely to allow a property to go into foreclosure if they're actually living in that property versus a property that is purely an investment for them. For that reason, banks are always willing to provide more financing and better financing terms to those owners who are going to be living in the property versus those who are just going to be using it as an investment. And this is where house hacking is essentially a hybrid between those two scenarios. Not only are you going to be using that property as your own primary residence, but you're also going to be using it as an investment. And you're essentially going to get the best of both worlds. So in a hypothetical scenario where a rental property was being offered for sale for $100,000, you would only need to save up $3,500, 3.5% of the purchase price if you were going to occupy that property and use an FHA loan. By contrast, if you are going with a non-owner occupied loan, you would likely have to save $20,000 or $25,000, 20 or 25% of the purchase price in order to get into that property. Now, it goes without saying that it is a lot easier to save $3,500 versus $20,000 or $25,000. And for that reason, house hack financing is much easier than non-owner occupied financing. Some of the other advantages of house hack financing are lower credit score requirements, less stringent debt-to-income requirements, and amortization periods as long as 30 years. All of these factors result in a much easier time financing an owner-occupied rental property versus a non-owner-occupied rental property. Reason number 2 why your first rental property should be a house hack is the ease of management. Now, it goes without saying that rental properties are not 100% passive. Somebody, either you or a rental property manager, is going to have to manage your property. But since you're watching this video, I assume that you're more likely to be a newer investor versus a more seasoned one, and that this is likely your first rental property that you're considering buying. Most of the time, people buying their first rental property are looking to save some money on management expenses and are looking to manage that property themselves. This was the case for me when I started investing in real estate and I bought my first duplex to house hack. Most of the time, if you just have one rental property and you're living somewhere nearby, you're likely going to be managing it yourself. And in that case, it is certainly a lot easier to manage your rental property if you're actually living at the property versus if you're living somewhere across town. When I say managing your property, I don't just mean fixing things or doing routine maintenance on the property. I actually mean managing your tenants. There are numerous points of interaction between you and your tenants during the course of their tenancy. And one of the things that happens with a lot of absentee landlords is they tend to start losing control of their property over time when it comes to tenant behavior. What happens when a landlord is not around very much is that tenants begin to start bending the rules in your lease and they start doing things that are not necessarily in your best interests when it comes to your rental property. For example, they may get lax with taking out their garbage, or they may start throwing loud parties, or maybe even breaking things in your property. None of this happens if you're actually living at the property, because your tenants know that there are repercussions immediately if you see them doing any of these things. This becomes a major advantage when you're comparing house hacking to non-owner occupied rental properties. Another thing is that if you are going to be doing some of the repairs on the property yourself, you're going to be saving yourself a lot of time if you're actually living at the property versus if you weren't living at the property. So imagine this scenario scenario. A tenant calls you during the day while you're at work and they tell you that there's a leaky pipe in their kitchen. You get done with your day, you come home, you change, and you grab your tools. If you were living across town from your property, then you have to actually drive to it and then begin your repairs. And if you were living next door, you would just walk over and begin those same repairs. Now imagine that while you're doing it, you realize that you forgot a wrench that you absolutely need to complete that repair at home. If you're living next door, you can just walk over and grab that wrench and complete the job. But if you're living somewhere across town, now you have to make a decision whether you want to make a trip back to your house, grab that wrench, and then come back to complete the job, or if you're going to end up going to a store, maybe getting another wrench and spending more money. Either way, you're making an additional trip that you otherwise wouldn't have to do if you were actually living at the property. These additional trips can definitely add up, and believe me, I've been in this scenario on both ends. I've had to repair things at my house hack where I could just walk over and do the thing that needed to be done, and I've also had to schlep across town in order to do that same repair at another property. There's definitely a big difference in frustration and aggravation when it comes to doing that with a property that's farther away. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to happen a lot or that you even have to deal with this particular issue. You may just pay a plumber who will do the job regardless of whether you're living at the property and you have a repair that needs to be done at your house hack or if it's a repair that needs to be done at a rental property across town. I'm simply pointing out that there's definitely a time saving involved if you're actually living at your house hack versus if the property is somewhere else. Sometimes it isn't something that you can simply outsource, especially if you need to communicate with your tenants about something, say maybe a new term of the lease, or maybe they asked you to come over for some other reason. So it's a lot easier to do that if you're living next to your tenants versus if the tenants are at another property somewhere across town. Reason number 3 is lower risk. Now, when it comes to investing in rental properties, one of the biggest risks that you run is that your rental property won't generate enough income for you to continue to pay the expenses for that property. This can happen for any number of reasons, including maybe there's an eviction moratorium and your tenants stop paying you rent and you can't evict them and replace them with another paying tenant. Now, if that happens at a non-owner occupied rental property, and let's say it's a duplex and both of your tenants at that property are unable to pay rent and you're unable to evict them, now it means that you don't have any income coming in for that rental property, but you still have that property's expenses. This would also be true if your tenant at your owner occupied rental property, your house hack, stopped paying your rent and you weren't able to evict them. Now, the difference between these two scenarios is that in scenario A, where you have a non-owner occupied rental property, you not only have the expense of that rental property, but you also have your own personal housing expense because you have to live somewhere. You would either have to pay rent to someone else because you're renting an apartment for yourself, or you're paying for your own mortgage and other housing expenses for your own single-family residence. In that case, you have both of those expenses occurring at the same time, and you have no income coming in from your rental. On the other hand, if this happens with your house hack, you don't have the same problem of a double housing expense. The thing is, your housing expense in your house hack is wrapped into the same property. So if you're doing your analysis correctly, and if you were essentially accounting for the fact that there may be periods of time when you're not going to get in your rent from your tenant, but you can still afford that mortgage because it's going to be the place where you're going to live, you should be in a better position than you would otherwise be if you own the non-owner occupied rental property and the tenants in that property stop paying your rent, leaving you with a double payment. Regardless of what happens with your tenant, you still need a place to live. And with a house hack, you have a much easier time of covering your housing expenses should something go wrong with your rental property. And for that reason, you have a lot less risk with a house hack versus a non-owner occupied rental. The fourth and last reason that I'll mention is that house hacking is essentially learning how to be a good real estate investor with training wheels. Because it is easier to finance, easier to manage, and involves a lot less risk, house hacking allows you a direct path to learning how to become a real estate investor. You can read 100 books, you can watch 1,000 YouTube videos, but you'll never get the same experience from those things as from owning your own rental property. House hacking gives you the opportunity to dip your toes into real estate investing without completely upending your life. Owning a house hack is a very part-time commitment. So even if you have a very demanding day job, you can still test it out and see if real estate investing is right for you. And if after trying it out for a while, you decide that real estate investing is just not for you, you can always sell your house hack and move into a single-family home without any significant financial consequences. Personally, I think house hacking is the best strategy for new real estate investors. This is how I started in 2011. I bought a duplex, I moved into one of the units, and I rented out the other unit. Since then, I bought many more rental properties, but I still own that duplex. Even after moving out and moving into my own single-family residence, I still have that property 10 years later. And 10 years later, it is still producing good returns for me as well as building equity. So if you're thinking about getting into real estate investing, I would highly encourage you to consider the house hacking method. If you guys enjoyed this video, please do me a favor and hit the like button. If you have any questions for me or if there's anything that I didn't cover, please let me know in the comments below. And if you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, definitely subscribe so you don't miss any of my future videos on house hacking, real estate investing, and legal topics. Thanks again for watching. Have a great day, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.